Well, welcome everybody to our weekly edition of Art Brunch, which, as you know, is a production of the Wama Art Asylum, which is the place to explore the wisdom of the arts, spirituality, and the great ideas, and find greater meaning and mission for one's life. Now, on occasion, this Art Brunch receives sponsorship, so I want to acknowledge one of our sponsors, that is Pine Street Church. Pine Street Church is a place that embraces everyone, which means it is a spiritual community of unconditionality, a community that believes in acceptance without exception. It is a place that inspires life, a community that believes in our human potential to be astonished about the beauty in our lives and to experience abundance. And finally, it is a community called to create more. Each of us was born to be a creator of beauty, kindness, equality, gentleness, joy. As imitators of our original creator, we have the opportunity to create more. Now to our presentation this week. Native American Perspectives, Finding the Center Place is what this particular presentation is on. I've been wanting to give a presentation on Native American spirituality and philosophy for some time. But I'm going to be honest with you. For most of my academic life, intellectual life, I guess, I had a bias toward classical Western history and culture. Any idea or significant event that took place in a country that bordered the Mediterranean, I valued highly. So classical Greece, Rome, Israel, Turkey, Egypt drew my attention. Native American culture and history didn't seem that interesting nor valuable to me at the time. Now, sure, as a kid wandering the woods, I imagined finding arrowheads. That would be cool. But Native Americans didn't seem to have how shall I say this? They didn't seem to have a philosophy of life, at least as sophisticated as the classical Greeks and Romans. So it seemed to me a youthful and rather ignorant, if I'm honest about it, kid. But I now realize that though I appreciate all that the major prophets, artists, philosophers, etc. of the Western world, I'm not completely at peace with what I've found. I have about maybe 95% of what I need, but there's something missing. I don't know if you feel this as well. And when I encounter Native American perspectives on the world, I get the sense that I'm receiving that missing 5 to 10%. Well, maybe receiving more than the missing 5 to 10%. Much more. Nearly all who are listening to this at the time of recording live in wealthiest nations of the world. And we have nice homes with solid walls and roofs, cars in the driveway that we use to go pick up anything we need. And yet on occasion, some of us actually pay money to go out and live in a tent in the backwoods. We will intentionally leave our regular communion with a television set to go commune with trees. Or go to sit by a river or stream and just look at the flow of water. Listen to its soothing talk. Now, we have all the food we need already processed for us at the grocery store, yet some of us go out and fish and hunt. Then either carve up the meat ourselves or pay someone else to process it for us. We supposedly civilized and tamed humans want to occasionally behave like our forebears and like the actual bear in the painting on the left, who fishes for its meal. Why on earth do we do this? If you think about it, this is very strange behavior. We have been given this wonderful gift of prosperity. We have worked our tails off, usually under great stress for years and years, just to have a nice home and a few cars. yet voluntarily and at an expense, mind you, push it all away at times to live a very primitive sort of life for a week or more. Why do we do this? Because there's something we miss in our comfortable life inside a home and with ready access to food and other conveniences. Perhaps Native Americans who have long revered a simpler way of life close to nature, voluntarily renouncing certain creature comforts, perhaps they can teach us something about ourselves, open up our eyes to see ourselves and the way we have constructed our lives in a new light. When I was 17, I spent a summer in a small fishing village in Mexico building a house. I slept every night in a tent with the earth directly underneath me. And it was a tent kind of like this tent, very simple, made of canvas material. Well, I remember when I returned home after an entire summer of living this way, I remember for about the first month back, I slept on the floor next to my bed rather than in the bed because I'd become so accustomed to sleeping on the ground. It was actually easier to fall asleep, sleeping on the floor. Now, maybe this is a little extreme of an example, but my point is this. We don't need all the creative comforts we believe we need. Creative marketing has convinced us we need them. So let's begin examining a people who seem at peace with a simpler way of living. First, I guess a brief history is in order of the Native American people. Many of you are familiar with the land bridge theory, which posits that the first inhabitants of the Americas came over the Bering Strait when it was covered with snow and ice around 14,000 years ago. Now, based on the latest archaeological discoveries, groups may have migrated earlier using a sea route, which you see in the blue line there. Some rock art located in the Amazon forests of Colombia, so that's a great distance from the Bering Strait, that land bridge, dates back 13,000 years. Now, the small black arrow on this image that you see towards the top is pointing to a possibly extinct species. Native peoples have forged knowledge and wisdom over many, many millennia, and we would do well to heed some of that wisdom in the midst of our frantic, over comfortable lifestyles, I should say. I would like to focus on a particular group of Native Americans right now, those of the Southwest where I live. Though they are made up of individual tribes, collectively they are known as the Pueblo after their distinctive architecture. The Pueblo people lived in the area of northwest New Mexico and northeast Arizona and parts of southern Utah and Colorado. One of these tribes, the Hopi, have an interesting story of their beginning. They believe that a long, long time ago, they emerged from the earth in what is now the Grand Canyon area. And they met one of their deities or spirit guides, a kind of caretaker of the earth known as Maasal. That's M-A-A-S-A-W. M-A-A-S-A-W, Maasal. This rock art that you're looking at right now, contrary to all the people that believe images like this are proof of alien contact long ago, this image may depict these spirit guides of the Pueblo people. Now, Maasal is an enigmatic figure, both frightening and inviting. Maasal is the giver of ancient wisdom to the Hopi. Now, I find this idea that the giver of wisdom is also one we should fear rather interesting, because this idea is actually pretty universal. Remember this story? Think of our beginning story of Adam and Eve. Who is the one who invites us into knowledge and wisdom? of ourselves and the world, the serpent, frightening yet fascinating, alluring even. Macaw told the Hopi that they must find their center place. This was their great quest, find their center place. And their center place was both an external geographical location where the people should settle, but it was also an internal geography. They were to go out in the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, and then travel around the earth from there. Some tribes went in a clockwise direction and other tribes in a counterclockwise direction until they would see a sign in the heavens telling them this is where they should settle. You could see the idea of traveling around the earth in their quest symbolized in the spiral. Hold on. Osnot, okay, thanks for letting Barbara in. All right, let me find my place again. Yeah, this idea of the center place is represented all over the Southwest in rock art, depicting a spiral. The spiral represents this journey the Pueblo people are called to undertake, exploring the earth until they find their home. This is one of the many rock art images created by Native Americans pre-Columbus. And it's a depiction of the rattlesnake in a spiral. You can see the diamond-shaped head at the end of the spiral, sort of larger. Despite, or perhaps because of the dangerous nature of the rattlesnake, many Native American tribes regard this snake with reverence, at least in the Southwest. Like other Native Americans, the Pueblo peoples believed that animals were their teachers. The rattlesnake, though deadly, when coiled in a spiral, was also a reminder of the call of Macaw to find their center place. This rock art is from the Fremont culture in southern Utah, who were active from 300 to 1300 of the Common Era. In this image, it appears that a serpent-like creature is literally teaching a shamanic figure on the right. Because the serpent is coiled in a spiral, this art may very well be teaching the Genesis story of the native peoples. Native peoples believe that this call to find their center place is a call to all creatures of the earth. So human beings are no better and no worse than other animals. Therefore, all animals deserve reverence and respect, especially because they are our teachers. If you need to find water out in the desert, follow the Bighorn Sheep. They will lead you there. The owl seems to have been thought of as a wise teacher. This is universal, of course, as we see this idea in all cultures. Now, I'm especially fond of the owl since in all the online quizzes I take where you can find your spirit animal, the owl is always mine. Do you know your spirit animal? I don't think it's a frivolous activity to discover it. So perhaps if you have some free time, go ahead and Google a quiz to find your spirit animal if you haven't done so yet. The spiritual center place for many Native Americans was identified with this place. This is Pueblo Bonito in a sacred area in northern New Mexico known as Chaco Canyon. This was an ancient place of pilgrimage for Native Americans. They traveled great distances to be here. Drinking vessels with the residue of chocolate have been found at Chaco Canyon. Now, cacao, from which we get chocolate, does not grow here. It grows in southern Mexico. That's quite a long journey away, especially on foot. Yet, obviously, native peoples traveled this great distance, bringing their sacred cacao beans to ceremonies at Chaco Canyon. Macaw bones and feathers have been found at Chaco Canyon. The macaw bird is native to southern tropical areas. Again, quite a long journey to northern New Mexico. Seashells from the Pacific coast have also been found at Chaco Canyon. So obviously, this was a pilgrimage site for many, many native peoples dispersed all over the Americas. Now, this is what Pueblo Bonito at Chaco Canyon looked like when it was used by native peoples. Do you see all of those circular buildings? Those are kivas. A kiva is a room where religious rituals are performed. It is a very sacred place to Native Americans, like a church or a temple. Recall the story of the beginnings of the Pueblo people. Maasal called them to go in the 4 cardinal directions to explore all the earth, then to travel from there around until they found their center place. Well, in native beliefs, there are actually 6 cardinal directions. 6. There's north, there's south, there's east, there's west, but also for the Hopi and for other Pueblo Native Americans, there was down and there was up. The Kiva represents all 6 directions. It is designed to have markers for the 4 cardinal directions. But the Kiva also has a wooden roof with a ladder leading out, marking the emergence of the people from below earth, the underworld. For native peoples, they are called to be explorers in every sense of that word, to explore the physical terrain of the earth and become friendly with all of it, the earth's creatures and its terrain, mountains, rivers, grasslands, and seas, but also become friends with what is below earth, the underworld, and what is high up in the sky, the celestial bodies. In this way, there are actually 6 cardinal directions. Exploring all of these directions is how we discover our center place. Friends, I usually love maps. They allow me to daydream about adventurous voyages to new places. But this map is not a very happy map. It shows the route of displacement of native peoples from their land in the 19th century. This route is known as the Trail of Tears. So out of our own greed, as well as our ignorance of the value of Native American philosophies and spiritual teachings, we dismissed Native Americans and their culture, treated them as less than human, and yet we desperately hunger at times for their way of life. We have acquired their lands to satisfy our needs, then voluntarily leave our creature comforts to live as they lived, close to the earth, intimate with the natural world. We do this, I believe, because we too have a need to find our center place. And we seem to struggle finding that spiritual home while living in our physical home. On this rock facing, we see a Native American calling all types of animals to him or herself. And there is the spiral of exploration and seeking extended out from one arm. To me, this image represents the place of heaven on earth to Native peoples, the Native American in harmony with all living creatures and with her world, seeming to commune with them as one would commune with close friends. We too long for this kind of harmony with our world. Though we may not be able to identify our inner restlessness as just that. And so we behave strangely, leaving our comforts to go out camping, hunting, fishing, hiking. Why do we do this? To find our center place. I want to invite you, if you feel like you haven't found your center, to perhaps begin a study of people who have an intimate knowledge of finding their center place. I certainly have found an enthusiasm recently for learning of their history and their ways of experiencing the world, and have found such perspectives not only enlightening, but enlivening to my spirit. Perhaps some of you will as well.